Thank you for tuning into Chapter 5 of the Real Enough series, Control+Alt+Delinquents. If you've made it this far and find yourself enjoying the novel, please, if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so that you'll be notified of any new stories that I place on the page. Comments are always welcome too. There's over 20 chapters of the first novel, and I'll be placing this audiobook out steadily. My main goal is to entertain, and it makes me so happy that I can write for you and narrate. I present to you Chapter 5. Enjoy. Keith's heart raced as he barreled down the street on his skateboard, trying to get home as quickly as possible. But then he noticed Billy, panting and chasing after him with a determined look in his eyes. Keith tried to ignore him and focused on finding the perfect hill to give him a speed advantage. The streets were eerily empty today, with no cars for him to grab onto for a quick boost of speed. He couldn't escape the relentless pursuit of the kid who had been after him for over a day now, itching for a fight. Keith frantically typed a message to his mom, his fingers shaking as he tried to hit the right buttons. But before he could hit send, a thin, brown-haired girl stepped out into the street in front of him, holding a menacing metal baseball bat in her hands. Marissa's dark eyes glinted with malice as she brandished the weapon, ready to strike at any moment. Keith's heart raced as he realized that she was not alone. Another figure, Billy, appeared behind him to block any escape. The two of them had clearly been planning this ambush, their phones likely used to coordinate their attack on Keith as he made his way home from Jack's house. With a defeated sigh, Keith pocketed his cell phone and reached down to grab his skateboard once again. He knew there was no point in trying to reason with these bullies. "Hey, Billy," Keith said through gritted teeth, trying to keep up a facade of calmness. "Oh, I missed you too," Marissa sneered, pushing her phone into her back pocket before tapping the bat against her empty palm. "I didn't know you thought of me that way," Keith retorted, unable to resist a snarky comeback. He couldn't help but notice the lack of protective gear. "So, no balls or catcher's glove. I guess this is not going to be a friendly game of baseball." "Oh, we got some balls right here she can play with," Billy said as he pushed at Keith. Billy was much larger than Keith, with a bodybuilder's frame that his parents forced on him so that he could be the king shit of the school. Keith couldn't really do much in a fight against him, but he thought that maybe he could push through Marissa if he needed to. "I thought she was too busy playing with your balls, though." "Wouldn't you be jealous if she was playing with mine?" Keith asked. He might have been uneducated with the standard euphemisms being tossed around him, but he understood the balls part enough to crack a good joke. "We know it was you," Marissa said. "You or Jack. We want to know, or we're just going to beat it out of you." At this point, Keith already knew what it was about. He knew that Jack gave the nude virtual reality mesh of Marissa to another student at the school that she had been expressly picking on, and that student had used it to make a fake Instagram account in her name. It was poetic justice, as Jack would put it. As Jack, "Maybe if you weren't being such jerks to everyone, you'd not be running into these problems," Keith said with a hint of fear in his voice, his words trembling slightly. But before he could finish, Billy charged at him with reckless abandon, slamming into him and sending him flying through the air. Keith landed with a thud in the nearby ditch, gasping for breath as he tried to regain his bearings. Meanwhile, Marissa grabbed her baseball bat and swung it down with all her might, shattering the skateboard that lay sideways on the ground. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the tense air. "No!" Keith's scream echoed through the empty street, his eyes blazing with fury. The sound of shattering wood filled the air as Billy took his turn, picking up the remains of what Marissa had started and slammed Keith's skateboard into the pavement, pieces flying in all directions. A twisted smile of satisfaction spread across Billy's face as Marissa's laughter mingled with his own. "What makes you think I'll tell you anything if you bust up my board?" Keith growled, baring his teeth like a cornered animal. "Eat shit and die, both of you." Marissa's laughter turned to maniacal cackling as she pointed at Keith, her eyes wild with sadistic glee. "Maybe we should make him eat shit. There's bound to be a dog turd around here somewhere." As Keith struggled to stand up from the ditch, Billy chimed in with a sneer. "Yeah, you want to pick it up?" A feral snarl escaped Keith's lips as he lunged towards Billy, ready to unleash all of his pent-up rage and frustration on the bully who had tormented him for years. "Listen, I swear it wasn't me, but if I had those fake photos of Marissa, I would have exposed her too. I'm not sorry, and I never will be." Keith scrambled to stand up, but his body convulsed in agony as Marissa launched a vicious kick at him. As Marissa's baseball bat hovered menacingly over Keith's head, he found himself sprawled on the ground once again. In a flash, another voice intervened, halting her mid-swing. It was a voice that sounded both confident and determined, with an underlying hint of sweetness. With a bewildered expression, Keith looked up to see a girl he had never laid eyes on before. She stood at about half his height, slender and graceful, dressed in frayed blue jeans and new blue and black sneakers. Her baggy shirt bore a striking resemblance to one of his own worn favorites, and her dark brown hair cascaded in natural waves around her face. But it was her bright blue eyes, flecked with freckles, that captured his attention the most. As she spoke again, her voice rang out like a bell, clear and unwavering. And as Keith took in her appearance and demeanor, he couldn't help but think how incredibly cute she was. The mystery girl stood with her phone in hand, filming everything that was happening. Her determined expression and the way she held her device like a weapon added to the tension in the air. Billy's face contorted in anger as he glared at the girl. "Who the hell are you?" he spat out. Marissa pointed an accusing finger at Keith, who was still recovering from their attack. "You're going to save this freak with your little video?" she sneered. The girl's voice was steady and unwavering as she spoke. "No, I'm here to burn you with the video and save him from your ill intent no matter what," she declared. "So get out of here and I won't send it." An idea sparked in Billy's mind and he turned to Marissa with a malicious grin. "What if we just break your phone?" he suggested. But the new girl remained unfazed. "It's saving to the cloud," she stated calmly. "Go before I change my mind and send it." The threat hung in the air, causing Marissa and Billy to exchange uncertain glances before slinking away, defeated. Keith watched with a mixture of surprise and disappointment as Marissa and Billy sprinted away together, leaving him alone in the ditch. His mouth hung open in shock as he watched the unknown girl nonchalantly tuck her cell phone into her pocket. She walked over to Keith, her petite frame seeming almost delicate as she reached out a hand to help him up. "Who are you?" Keith asked, still trying to process what had just happened. "I can't believe they ran off like that." With the girl's assistance, he managed to stand up despite the muddy ground and her slight build. As she brushed off his clothes with one hand while still holding on to his hand with the other, she replied, "I think they were afraid of getting caught for something at school, but don't worry about them." Their eyes met, and they both smiled. "I'm Nettie." Keith's heart raced as he introduced himself to the new girl standing in front of him. He couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement at meeting someone new in this small town. As he kneeled down to grab his damaged skateboard, he reluctantly let go of her hand. But even in that brief moment, there was a connection between them that left an impression on both of them. "I just moved into town," Nettie explained, stepping closer to Keith and inspecting his broken board. "It's totaled." Keith's voice had a tinge of sadness as he replied, "For real?" Nettie placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, causing a small smile to tug at the corners of his mouth. "It won't be the last board you ever own, I'm sure. Maybe we can go to the mall sometime and get you a new one?" she suggested with a friendly tone. Keith couldn't help but feel grateful for her kindness. "I only need the deck. I can salvage the bearings and wheels," Keith explained, while Nettie tapped away on her phone. "What are you doing, sending that video anyway?" Nettie bit her bottom lip playfully and giggled before shaking her head. "Nothing so devious. Just keeping my mom updated on current events. What do you want to do today?" she asked with genuine curiosity. Keith shrugged nonchalantly. "I was planning on going over to my friend Jack's place, but now I don't know if I should." He winced slightly as he tried to stand up straight, feeling pain in his back and sides from the fall. Nettie immediately stepped in to help him stand and dust himself off, wrapping her arm around his back for support. She stayed close by as they walked out of the ditch together. "You might want to go home and take a shower first if you decide to go back to Jack's place. You look like you could be in a Tide commercial," Nettie joked, trying to lighten the mood. Keith chuckled softly despite the pain and flashed her a grateful smile. "You're right," he admitted, wiping his eyes on his forearm. "So, Nettie, will you be joining me at school? I hope I get to see you around." Nettie's bright blue eyes lit up with mischief as she squinted playfully at him. Keith couldn't help but shake his head, wondering what she was thinking. "What?" he asked, not getting a response. You didn't just chase away those mean kids so you could be mean to me instead? Nettie shook her head with a giggle and that same cute, mischievous grin. It was clear that she enjoyed being around him and wasn't afraid to show it through her body language. No way, I would never be mean to you, she promised, making Keith's heart flutter. I guess your mom wants you to come home after all this drama? He asked jokingly. Instead of answering verbally, Nettie simply smiled and nodded her head before swaying her hips slightly side to side while looking at him with those captivating blue eyes. Keith couldn't help but feel drawn to her in that moment. Nettie typed a little on her phone while they walked. Keith took a peek and saw the words "Mom" on the screen, but he was respectful and didn't read any more than that as they walked down the street together. With the morning sun warming his face, Keith strolled along the familiar path towards his house. He tucked one hand into his pocket and watched as Nettie walked beside him, her pace slightly slower as she matched his limping gait. As they walked, he couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement at showing her around his neighborhood. I hope you'll like it here, he said, glancing over at her with a smile. Maybe I can introduce you to my friend Jack sometime. He's probably the only person I really click with here. Nettie nodded, understanding the feeling all too well. I don't have many friends either, she admitted. Well, you've made one today, Keith declared proudly, a faint blush appearing on his cheeks as he smiled at her. Nettie returned his smile, her eyes lighting up with genuine happiness. She reached out to touch one of the scratches on his arm from their earlier encounter. Keith flinched instinctively. Oh, I'm sorry, Nettie apologized quickly, her hand pulling back. You're hurt. It's nothing, Keith reassured her, a small smile playing on his lips. Thanks to you. Nettie kept her smile in place and without thinking, reached out to hold his hand. The warmth from their touch spread through both of them. Keith glanced down at their joined hands before gently pulling away. I actually have a girlfriend, he said politely, offering an explanation for why they couldn't continue holding hands. I wouldn't want her seeing me holding hands with another girl. He let out a small laugh before trailing off with a shake of his head. Nettie tilted her head curiously as they continued walking. Her expression seemed to be encouraging him to open up more about whatever was on his mind. She's been acting weird lately, Keith finally admitted, unable to resist confiding in Nettie. I don't know what's going on. It can be hard to understand, Nettie sympathized, her voice soft and reassuring, especially when the world around you doesn't make sense. Keith stopped abruptly, causing Nettie to pause as well. He looked at her with a stunned expression, his jaw dropping slightly. In that moment, they both seemed lost in each other's eyes. The next thing she knew, Keith's hands were on her shoulders. Thank you, he said sincerely, his warm gaze locking onto hers. Where did you come from, Nettie? He asked as he looked her over like he had just found a treasure. When you find out my secret, promise you'll still look at me with those adoring eyes. Keith's confusion turned to amusement as he nodded in agreement. I promise, now tell me. Nettie took a deep breath, even though she didn't need to, and sighed before continuing. Not yet. Let's sit down first so I don't accidentally knock you over with the shock of it all. Let me guess, you're from another planet? Keith joked as they resumed their walk home. Nope, Nettie grinned mischievously. You're a vampire, Keith playfully teased. Wrong again, Nettie laughed. You're a time traveler trying to save two humpback whales named George and Gracie? Keith tried again. Nettie playfully kicked his leg as they walked. Nice try, but nope. I knew you were secretly my bully, Keith joked. Okay, enough guessing games, Nettie said, coming to a stop. I have something important to ask you before we get home. Shoot, Keith replied. If you like me, I hope that doesn't change after you find out my big secret. So, do you like me? Nettie held her breath, unsure of what his answer would be. Keith stopped walking too and looked at her seriously. Nettie, I already have a girlfriend. Even though things are complicated right now, I could never cheat on her. Nettie nodded understandingly. I would never want you to cheat either, but if things ever change one day and you're single, could you see us being more than friends? This is moving pretty fast, Keith blushed and scratched the back of his head nervously. We've only known each other for like 7 minutes, and now you're asking me to marry you? Nettie couldn't help but laugh at his joke, leaning over her knees in amusement. Keith couldn't hold back his laughter either. Okay, let me rephrase, Nettie said with a grin. Do you see us having the potential for a romantic relationship in the future? Yes, Keith exclaimed excitedly. I would love to go out with you, you crazy girl. But if things ever change and I become single, I might need a little time to process it all. Nettie nodded happily. I can give you all the time you need. Keith pointed his broken skateboard, the wheels clogged with dirt and debris, towards Nettie's crotch area. She squinted her eyes in response, and Keith raised a questioning eyebrow. You're not a man, are you? He asked, gesturing towards her with the board. Nettie squinted even harder, slapping the board away from her body. No, she exclaimed. Haha, then yes, I promise. Alien, vampire, Starfleet officer, whatever it is. You can be the next girl that gets to act weird on me 3 weeks after we start dating if Angelica dumps me. You're in queue, Keith declared with a smirk. Nettie bit her bottom lip nervously, unsure of why she felt so flustered. Okay, remember, you're giving me a chance despite any complications that may arise, she reminded him. As they walked home together, time seemed to pass by quickly. Keith swung open the door to their house, and his mother Cassie was already in the kitchen cooking dinner. How was your day? She asked Keith with a knowing smile on her face. Nettie couldn't help but notice the subtle exchange between them. It was good. I met a friend, Keith replied, pointing back at Nettie. I'm going to show her my room. Nettie and Cassie shared a look as Keith headed off towards his room. Cassie shook her head and stifled a giggle, while Nettie noticed how Keith tried to hide the broken skateboard from his mother as he passed by. In that moment, Nettie realized that there were secrets being kept within this household, and it wouldn't be long before everything was revealed. As they entered Keith's room, he opened his closet to grab some fresh clothes. Feel free to use my computer chair or bed, he offered. I'm just going to... He paused as he noticed something out of place in his closet. In a drawer that had never been there before, he found a pair of women's panties. Going to change? He stammered, his face turning red with confusion. Nettie couldn't hold back her laughter. Are you sure you're not a girl and just not telling me? She joked, pointing at the panties. She watched as Keith's face turned even redder in embarrassment. I have no idea what the hell is going on, he confessed, clearly flustered. Nettie collapsed onto the bed, making herself comfortable on the soft sheets. So all of this is mine now, she declared playfully. But remember, I'm still in queue. So if anything happens, I'm next in line, even if we are step-siblings. Excusez-moi. Keith dropped the panties in shock as the bedroom door suddenly opened. What's this about being in queue? Cassie asked after overhearing their conversation. Nettie's blue eyes widened in surprise. Hey, Mom, she exclaimed. Mom? Keith repeated, looking between Cassie and Nettie in disbelief. What's this about a queue? Cassie asked Nettie. Oh, nothing, Nettie replied with a mischievous smile. Well, actually, I didn't tell him the other part yet. There's more? Keith asked incredulously. Cassie guided Keith to sit down on the bed while Nettie leaned in from behind and wrapped her arms around him. With a stifled hesitation, Cassie delivered the final bombshell revelation. Remember that server system we set up in the garage? She asked. As her son's mouth hung open in shock, Cassie knew that everything was about to change for their little family. Cassie gestured towards Nettie, her hands trembling slightly. Well, that's actually... she's an android, she explained to Keith. Nettie shifted nervously on her feet, trying to gauge his reaction. He remained frozen, his face a mask of shock and confusion. This could be a Stack Overflow error, Nettie joked, trying to break the tension. Maybe we should delete his code? Cassie rolled her eyes at Nettie's attempt at humor. Mom, Keith spoke up, breaking the silence. Can I have a moment alone with my sister? His voice was barely a whisper. Cassie nodded, looking between them with concern. Of course. Take all the time you need. She patted Keith's leg before slowly making her way out of the room and closing the door behind her. Alone now, Keith turned to face Nettie, who had been holding on to him from behind. I understand why you wanted me to promise not to tell anyone. But you have to understand something, he began, his tone serious. Nettie felt a strange sensation deep within her circuits, almost like her programming was in flux. She didn't like it. It was as if her processor was about to overload and catch fire. You didn't have to do that, Keith continued, his voice shaky. He pulled away from her and looked into her eyes. Concern flickered across Nettie's face for a moment before she saw the look in his eyes and realized what he was about to do. It wouldn't have changed anything. he said softly before pulling her into a tight hug. Nettie's jaw dropped in surprise, and she felt a knot in her chest release as she finally allowed herself to relax into his embrace. "You should call Jack and tell him you won't be coming over," Nettie suggested while still in Keith's arms, her eyes focused on the ceiling. "Mom's making dinner and you have a new sister." She couldn't help but let out a little gasp of relief as she spoke. "What?" Keith pulled back slightly, his laughter mingling with a faint sniffle. "We're not even officially siblings for 5 minutes and we're already keeping secrets from Mom," he joked, raising an eyebrow at Nettie. "Let's just not mention the Q to her," Nettie said, feeling a sense of contentment wash over her as she looked up at her new brother's face. She knew that they were going to be all right. Nettie's lips curved into a mischievous half smirk, her crystal blue eyes twinkling with playful intent. Keith couldn't resist returning the smile, his own cheeks dimpling as he gazed into her gaze. "I'd still love to meet Jack sometime," Nettie said, her voice dancing with teasing amusement. "You will soon," Keith replied, his hand reaching for his glasses as he made a call. "Hey Jack, sorry I can't make it over. Let me guess, Angelica finally wanted to hang out with you?" "No. Billy and Marissa attacked me today, but I managed to break free thanks to a new student that intervened," Keith explained, keeping Nettie in the loop as Jack beat around the bush. "Speaking of Angelica, I have some bad news, man. I flew my drone over to her house, and she's been sneaking off to Dean's place a lot lately." Keith sighed, his gaze turning towards an empty space in the room where Jack's image was likely being displayed on his augmented reality sensor. "They're just friends, Jack. Just because a boy and girl hang out doesn't automatically mean something more is going on." "Bull McShit, dude," Jack's voice crackled through the speaker. "You're so head over heels for her that you can't see what's right in front of your face." Keith stood up from his chair and walked towards the phantom figure of his friend before speaking again. "No, I truly believe that men and women can be friends without any romantic feelings involved." "Yeah, keep telling yourself that," Jack retorted with a knowing chuckle. "But let's look at it this way. She had plenty of opportunities to hang out with you, yet she chose not to. That should tell you everything you need to know about her feelings towards you. She'd rather spend time with her other friends than be with you." Jack was right. Keith knew it deep down, but he didn't want to face the truth. He may have been able to muster up cunning remarks in the midst of a physical fight, but when it came to matters of the heart, he shied away from confrontation. As he turned to look at Nettie, he could see the curiosity and concern in her eyes. "Do me a favor and keep me updated on any new developments," Keith requested with a tight-lipped smile. "Whoa! Dude, who are you? And what did you do with my friend?" Jack retorted playfully, trying to lighten the mood as Keith made his exit. "I'm the same guy," Keith said with a smile. "Uh-huh," Jack said. "All right, man. Glad you're okay. Hang out tomorrow?" "Most likely. I'll let you know tomorrow." "Yeah, you go ahead and try and fit me into your schedule." Jack made fun of office-like comment. "Obviously someone's with you. Who is it? Angelica?" "My sister." "Okay, your sister," followed by a brief pause. "Your sister?